We are being recorded. Excellent. All right. I will call to order this April 9th, 2026 meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission at 6:17 p.m. Again, apologies for our late start. As usual, we're having technical issues. We are not live streaming the meeting right now, but we will be posting the meeting recording ASAP. Apologies to members of the public, but we are meeting our statutory requirements with the recording. And of course, the agenda being done. In attendance tonight here in chambers, we have city staff Kelsey Garcia, planning commissioners, Shaylee Bryant, myself, Kaya Marienfeld, and Jill Tatton. And we have Commissioner Carolyn Conant attending on Zoom. We also have city staff Corey Shirtliff and Johanna Blanco attending virtually, and our city council liaison Miles Lofton as well. I don't know if anybody else is in the Zoom room yet. I can't see them, but we have no one in chambers here physically. First item of business is citizens to be heard. Question about if we're not live streaming, can our people who are waiting to speak see that we're like here and going and things like that?
We only have one applicant who's in. You can't see Courtney, but she is in the Zoom meeting, not in the waiting room. So I think that's our only
Okay.
applicant for tonight.
So someone, if they tried to get in via Zoom, could see the meeting and watch the meeting. Maybe tell Eve that.
Except we wouldn't accept the public. It's just applicants, and Courtney's our only applicant for the
Well,
evening.
no, I mean Eve as our note taker. Probably that might be a
Sure.
nice gesture. Okay. And then also worth noting, the Zoom link was not included in the agenda tonight. I don't know if it normally is. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Yep. Sorry, give me a second. Eve is messaging me. Does someone have her email? Can we send her the link for Zoom?
Okay.
I just told her you'll send her the Zoom link, Johanna.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Backing up, we've introduced who's here. First item of business is citizens to be heard. We do not have anyone here in chambers, and we did not receive anything via email as far as I can tell.
Correct.
All right. So moving on, next item is item number 3, our approval of minutes. We have minutes from our last meeting, which was on the 26th of February. If folks have had a chance to look those over, we can entertain a motion or make any corrections if we need them.
I can make a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission from February 26, 2026.
All right, we have a motion for approval from Carolyn. Is there a second?
I second it.
A second from Shaylee. Any discussion? Any corrections?
I looked over it. I didn't see anything that wasn't.
Great. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes from our February 26, 2026 meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Shaylee, would you mind moving the mic a little closer? Okay. I'm sorry. All right. Do we have Eve in the meeting, Johanna, who can see now?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. Apologies for all the issues, folks. Next, we have a public hearing, item 4.1. Consideration and possible recommendation to City Council of City Ordinance 2026-07, An ordinance amending the text of the Moab Municipal Code, section 17.08.060, to update the process by which the city grants exceptions to its requirements governing the construction of sidewalk, curbs, and gutters. All right. What we'll do is we'll open the public hearing, have city staff give a presentation, and then we will, if we have anyone speaking at the public hearing, we'll hear public comments, leave it open, and then close it at the end. Hey, Kelsey, could you hit OK on the meeting is being recorded? We can't see anybody's faces otherwise.
You just.
Like
The
you
Zoom?
see on Zoom, just click OK. That way that'll disappear. Are those motion sensor lights? Thank you. Sorry.
And Eve has joined now, just FYI.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Nice.
Okay, I will open the public hearing on item 4.1 at 6:23 p.m. Staff, we're ready for the presentation.
Okie doke. So here is this item is brought to you by the City of Moab. We don't have a citizen applicant. This is the current code for 1208-060, sidewalk, curb, and gutter required at the time of construction. Hopefully you guys have read over this. This is currently when a site is built upon, they are required to install sidewalk, curb, and gutter along their frontages. They may also go to the city council to get an exception for a fee in lieu. They need to meet the criteria of 200 lineal feet, single household residence is the use, not perpetuating a half-paved street, and it needs to be consistent with the street character. And then we calculate the fee in lieu for them. The proposal is changing out city council for the city manager. And then we're adding a new tier of exception, which would be a total exception rather than an exception where you pay a fee in lieu. Here is the proposed language. We can see in A and C that we're changing from city council to city manager. And then section F, we're adding the new total waiver exception with the following criteria. The entire street where the lot or property is located is unpaved in its entirety. The city had not previously collected a fee in lieu for other property owners on the street. And then the street is not part of a larger city project to be paved. So this will be the same as our other item today. This is what the code currently lays out to you for the criteria of changing the code. So we got this list of questions to consider. Today we are putting forward a recommendation to City Council. They are going to be the approval body for code changes. Staff's answers to these questions are included in your packet. And that is the end of my brief. If we have any questions. Or Corey would like to say something. Yes.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to jump in with a little bit of additional commentary. So to give and provide a little bit more context to why this is coming through as a city initiated or city initiative text amendment, outside of what would be our larger land use code update and our complete streets policy, there was a current construction situation where this question was asked to the city administration where the current provisions of the code seemed inadequate. So that property owner was intending to pursue some option, whether it was a text amendment of their own writing and construction or a development agreement very specifically for their own property. And as we were going through that legal analysis and their opportunities to advance some option of remedy, it highlighted that the city administration saw the opportunity here to, in this very surgical way, improve this context. This two-tiered system maintains what we do have, but then creating a higher criteria threshold for properties where a fee in lieu may not make sense. That is, again, three options, which is to construct as the requirements might have you. The fee in lieu option, which is was formerly a city council determination, and then into what would be a total exception if you meet this very specific criteria. Now, within the city limits, there are very few right-of-ways that might meet this situation. So the question of whether this has weight to carry forward, is it worth the change? At least from the city's administration determination is yes, at this time it would be, in that with our annexation policy and future annexations, we may inherit a number of right-of-ways that could meet this criteria. And for the sake of developers, at least without a more specific uh, transportation plan or unified transportation plan adoption, we want to create that option where it's not an unreasonable hardship for immediate construction, particularly for single household construction or small lot construction builds. So this has been through our legal review. This was actually drafted by our legal team, not in-house by our planning staff. So we've reviewed this and we accept and believe this criteria would be adequate and meet the needs of what are the current properties that might be identified within that, as well as future options. So without painting too much of a more specific detail on the impetus, I think that maybe hopefully colors in why we're seeing this, especially given out of the planning office. We've typically been looking to hold off on text amendments until we have a little bit more of a comprehensive uh, ability to look at the land use code or offsets. This is in Title 12, not specifically in Title 17, but it is a development standard that we would be reviewing. So in very few contexts, I think it could be appropriate to say, well, let's fix this problem now. It's very likely not to talk about future agenda items too much, but there may be others, particularly to the vendor code we might be coming to visit prior to our larger land use code update. So I think at least from the community development realm, that might be the piece I'd want to provide.
Thank you.
Could you explain a bit more the under F provision number 2? I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around that one.
Yeah, so in the specific property that started this ball rolling, they brought forth evidence that the city had previously not pursued getting a fee in lieu from other neighbors who had built and did not construct. So that was added in there, that if we had previously pursued having somebody else get a fee in lieu, then it wouldn't really be fair to this new person. Now that this code has passed, my neighbor just had to pay, but now I won't. Does that make sense? So only if you're on your whole street, if nobody has ever paid fee in lieu before, would you be eligible?
Yeah, it does. How I was interpreting it. I was just trying to think of what the implications of that would be in terms of um like the outstanding need to construct sidewalk curbs and gutters and sort of like kicking the can down the road by saying, well, these other people never had to pay for it, so now nobody else on the street will ever have to pay for it. So
Mhm.
who's gonna pay for it, or how will the work get done? And
Yeah,
also, especially I think in the example that Corey gave of like future annexation scenarios where this is likely to be true because they would never have, nobody would have paid those fees before because previously they were part of the county.
absolutely. Yeah. I think Corey had something to add.
Yes, I think the only thing I might add to that, because that is one of the risks I think to the city that could identify as well. Now we do want to start that ball rolling, as it were. Um, so with that, the idea of this being responsive to what would be an approved transportation plan. So if we have the intent to construct, I think that would kick this particular area out. So that would have to be initiated now in some way that couldn't be just an individual builder, because this is the city manager shall, not a city manager may. So if you meet this criteria, it's administratively approved in that way. So that's something that I'm glad you've illuminated that, but that does create a bit of that, if we might consider a risk about future development. But that the only way to, I think, manage this in a non-discretionary way is to have that fixed. So the city would take some initiative to begin the improvements. And again, this construction is pretty atypical that this includes curb, gutter, sidewalk, which are typically customary to the owners of a single lot being obligated to construct, but it's very rare that the entirety of the street of an unpaved road, a dirt road, we would say, oh, you got to pave that section in front of your street. That's very atypical. And this is actually, excuse me, historic to the way we had very historically permitted subdivisions to construct. Now, those right-of-way improvements would need to be constructed. So this is only for very historic areas for single household type construction. So if we're talking new development or a new road system, this won't be a factor. So this is a way to, I guess, in a sense, allow for our more rural character right-of-ways to preserve and continue until it is the city's obligation to improve on its behalf, and then owners would have to come into compliance after the fact. That was a bit of a messy explanation, but I hope it covers that. You've highlighted a really important pinch point, but I think it is contemplated that we're conceding that idea.
Number 3 under that, the street where the lot or property is located is not subject to project the city has approved to pave or otherwise improve the street. Just the wording on that is a little confusing. Is there a way we could clean that up just a little bit?
Yeah, when I read, I thought would do nicely.
Yeah.
If you want to adjust that in your motion, I would agree.
And maybe versus a specific language, we can recommend approval with modifications by legal team to clean that up and let them smith that themselves.
Yeah.
That's a great catch.
Do we discuss it before the meeting or before the public hearing or after?
We can public hearing is happening right now.
Okay.
So, yeah, because what would that say is located is not subject to a project the city has previously approved to pave or otherwise improve the street. That might make it a little clearer what, like, just the subject verb agreement was a little strange.
I guess one question that I have is when we're granting an exception, historically, it's been a voted on process, whether it's through us or through the city council. And I don't know that I think these exceptions need to go all the way to city council. I think they could potentially be handled here. I do wonder if it sets the city as a whole up for failure if you have a non-elected official making these exceptions without due process. That was the one question I kind of have, because I actually think this is a logical thought process. I live on one of these roads. And while I would really love our road paved, I have no idea when that's gonna happen, and it would be weird to expect someone to put in a sidewalk. And then it kind of, because it does not fit in where my house is as far as like making it be consistent with the street character. But I also wonder if we don't have the fee in lieu, if it prevents the city from updating the street sooner rather than later. That would be my other thought is, again, just splitting a road like that.
Johanna, you might piece in this from a legal and due process perspective. The fee in lieu, and it remains discretionary, but rather than city manager based off a criteria, which is appropriate and fits within the context of state code administrative through criteria. It's is that as a legislative action by council, which is an administrative action by council, gives kind of the conception. So the way LUDMA is currently being constructed towards discretionary actions and non-discretionary actions. This is to say the fee in lieu is an administrative action, but it was taken to council. So that's why we made it the city manager, is it should be administrative throughout. But is a may, so it's discretionary on how that may work in a context for fee in lieu. This new provision, which is not repealing the fee in lieu, is a shall, but again, to a higher criteria level. So I guess to the legal degree, I don't think there's concern of violations of due process or non-propriety of how to move through that action. But your point of, again, intention of when and how those streets are being paved, in theory, the idea is we want all of our right-of-ways to be up to full compliance standards at any or the most minimum thresholds. This is saying we identify that there are rural character streets that, and forgive the non-technical phrase here, the popcorn style of improvement of this property owner and just their frontage, and then that property owner and just their frontage, that piecemealed effect, which we see throughout Moab, actually can create continuity issues, as you've pointed out, Shaylee, that actually, until it's a comprehensive improvement, it won't really make sense or be effective. So this is to say, if the entirety of the street is in a certain context, the city will not push through a low trigger for it to start popcorn improving. We will coordinate in a coordinated fashion with probably the engagement of the owners on the street and stakeholders, say, now we're ready to improve the street. The travel and level of service is now asking for requirement for it to be brought up. But that, like you said, the owners may have different opinions of when that would be or when that wouldn't be. So this doesn't really, I think, address that intent of the owners, but it does give us basically two buckets to work with, which was previously just one very kind of minimal level bucket other than the fee in lieu.
Well, and being super new, we have to grant every exception to parking that comes to us. So why wouldn't this also?
I mean, we don't have to grant every exception for parking that comes to us. We tend to, just because I think we all have the perspective that our parking requirements are pretty onerous.
Right. I don't mean grant. I mean,
it
comes
just
to us.
that the process asks.
I think my only issue is that I think it should have a vote on these exceptions instead of it being a singular person.
Yeah. I think that'd be my only hang up with it too.
I think this is smart.
Yeah, I do think this is far less common than the parking exceptions and doesn't apply to as many places as the parking exceptions do. So it's not like this is some massive thing that one of our appointed or elected bodies is doing on a regular basis, frankly, like the parking exceptions tend to be.
Like, I don't think this would add too much to our plate because it's so rare.
So with that, the only thing I might say is that discretionary actions by any land use authority, whether it be planning commission or a council, are fairly narrow, and they are governed by LUDMA. So when we're talking development, what we will run risk of if you let this play out over time. If we grant it in one context and not another, That is arbitrary and capricious application of the code. That's a legal liability we have, and we
Yeah.
will lose that fight. So the idea is if we're going to grant it at all, make it administrative and make it through a criteria that the commission and the land use authorities accept that universally we believe this is applicable. Now, this is a big debate. It's an evolution in the state of Utah of moving out of discretionary territory and into administrative, knowing that case law and that the arbitrary capricious applications. This is why, again, a lot of communities are moving away from conditional use permits. They're inherently flawed to put liability onto the approval authorities because unless you approve it every time, you're arbitrarily applying the code if they meet the criteria. Now, this is different than, say, a rezone or even a text amendment in itself, what we're going through right now, in that you, as the body, are saying, does this align with our guiding documents, our general plan, our larger intent and purpose visioning processes? So you guys are an interpretive authority on what the larger changes are. But when we're talking development code, we will run foul of due process and legal proceedings. So this context is either we're in or we're out. I'd like to prefer it that way to kind of frame it that we are either in for this type of an exception or we are out, and we are going to apply the code uh, consistently and uniformly
Yeah.
on either side of that. So that's my piece. Is I'd be uh, very reserved in applications of discretionary option of a land use authority.
That makes sense to me, and I feel like is probably the fundamental difference where like we really are taking each parking exception. No two is alike. There are circumstances in either, even though we do tend to be pretty you know, not loose with them, but forgiving with the parking exceptions, understanding that they are a pretty high bar for applicants to meet sometimes. This really is not, it's almost not just, it's a non-discretionary discretionary thing that this is the reason that this is being contemplated is to make it uniform and consistent across every time it's applied. Correct? Like it would be city manager saying, here's the criteria, here's the objective ways it fits or doesn't. It's not like they're going to be sitting down looking at sort of the preponderance of the evidence every time and going, well, I think this time it sort of slightly tips in this favor for this reason, which I think would be more of a better to have it be like a public deliberative body that did that.
Yeah, that makes more sense. It doesn't
Maybe-
leave us liable,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe one last comment, but to the defense of Shaylee's comment and also Kaya's, is currently our parking exception is a great example of what you would say is a discretionary type exception process. So you're saying, well, we do it there. Why aren't we doing it here?
Yeah.
You are exactly right. And we are just as equally
shouldn't
liable
be
about that
doing it
code.
anywhere.
So we're identifying, should we be looking at that code to make it off of a more strict criteria basis? So again, the precedent, and we talk about this every time we have a parking exception, is the precedent that we're setting, we need to maintain. And if we deviate, we are running into liability of a challenge, which we will lose. So that's a great example of something we currently have in the code that we are exposed. So as we move forward, we're going to filter through this lens, especially with the land use code update.
Yeah.
Where are those liabilities? How can we reduce those in areas that we in this group? So I would say, again, I'd say identifying those areas in a reserved context, if in few instances that you truly believe there is a true interpretive element, that is something I would get behind and defend of the land use authority being an interpretive
Yeah.
body to that. But if it is truly criteria based, so that is to say you could go discretionary with this option. But I would say it is fully discretionary based off of guiding documents or criteria based. It's when you mix the blend. So if you have criteria and then you're being discretionary, which is basically a conditional use permit, that is the most dangerous territory, which is like our parking exception. So this has turned out to be a really great land use discussion. Maybe if we don't get into our land use ordinance update, there you go. We just did it. So well done. And I commend that thought process, but that is a great option for your recommendation to consider one of those two paths. But it's that the foot in each boat that becomes the most liability fraught.
Yeah. Great. Carolyn, any other comments? God, I am sitting right under a vent and I am just an icicle in these chambers. Wait, wasn't there something they said we could do in the past? Didn't we go through this?
Yeah, hard restart. Go over, click on, click off. It'll act like it's daytime because right now it's on its nighttime setting.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. It's so cold. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much, Corey and Johanna, for the great explanation, and Shaylee, Carolyn, for the good questions as well. So where are we now? We still have the public hearing open. We still don't have anyone here in chambers and haven't received anything via email. So I am comfortable closing the public hearing at 6:47 p.m. And then we can take a recommendation if we want. We can deliberate more, up to everybody else. So public hearing is closed at 6:47 p.m.
Perfect. No, I think this is incredibly smart because I've definitely had a lot of people I've talked to over the last few years that they're like improving their properties and end up subject to this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense. But it, the code is what the code is.
Yep.
And it ties the hands of our planning team. So I think it's an intelligent diversion.
Yeah.
That's not the word, but
That's good. Move forward.
Yeah. Do
Mhm.
you want to make a motion?
Yeah, we're not changing anything, right?
I
Doing the wording
think
for clarity.
you could make the motion as it's written at the recommended motion in the agenda summary and then say with the verbiage changes noted to item F3 or something
Okay.
like that.
All right, I'll
Sorry,
work on it.
last quick question.
Oh, yeah.
City manager instead of community development director being the kind of admin call on this one. What's the reason for that?
In a way, one with the fee in lieu, typically that's where the legal exaction process would land is in our code where it says at discretion of the city, that would be the city manager. In very few instances, it might be not even community development, but maybe the planning coordinator if it is a planning specific element. But as this bridges, I would say planning, engineering, and public works. It's a multi-department type of designation. Again, Title 12. So it has a larger context where city manager might be appropriate for that secondary exception process. Another really good observation and question.
Got it. I feel we have great trust in our community development director and their knowledge of land use and planning considerations. So just wanted to ask about it.
Planning Commission's extreme bias towards Corey noted. I think we're all in agreement there.
But it feels like the only thing we're really concerned about is I get the admin thing. I just think we want to set ourselves up for success as a whole and making good decisions. So I think we're all a little nervous about giving one person the power to grant these exceptions. I don't think it matters who the person is.
Yeah.
But I totally get the admin side of things. That if you make it administrative, then it doesn't leave us open for the legal.
Yeah. And noting that there is always the option to appeal to the land use authority from any of this, just like there is with everything else. So, and that is not like some onerous litigation thing. It's a much lower bar to clear for an applicant. So we love our administrative law judges. Okay.
Yes, we do.
So yeah,
Okay.
Jill, if you
I'll go
want
ahead. I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the Moab City Council for City Ordinance 2026-07, an ordinance amending the text of the Moab Municipal Code Section 17-08060 to update the process by which the city grants exceptions to its requirements governing the construction of sidewalk, curbs, and gutters, along with in section F3 in the amendment that it be reworded for clarity in some of the verbs.
There we go. Okay, we have a motion with a modification from Jill. Is there a second?
I second it.
A second from Shaylee. Any further discussion from anyone for the motion on the table? Okay, all in favor of the motion and modification, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff, again for the great discussion. Moving right along to item 4.2. Oh boy. Consideration and possible recommendation to City Council of City Ordinance 2026-08, an ordinance of the City Council of Moab amending Moab Municipal Code Title 17, Chapter 17.21, Commercial Residential Zone, Section 17.21.030 area, width and location requirements to increase the building envelope of commercial buildings, and Section 17.21.040 special provisions to decrease the street landscaping strip, and Chapter 17.09 supplementary requirements and procedures applicable within zones, Section 17.09.220 off-street parking and loading number of spaces to apply parking spot carryover during use changes to all zones, and Section 17.09.230 off-street parking and loading, location and control facilities to allow parking fee in lieu in the C2 zone. That is a lot of stuff. Please explain to us what we are doing and why. Johanna, I assume.
Pardon, I went a little crazy with the
Okay.
common language.
No, I like the explanation after every code change. That's helpful actually for me.
Okie doke. So the applicant today is with us, Courtney Kaiser, on behalf of the landowner of 198 East Center. Our map is really blown up so we can see all of the spaces that are C2, and the red rectangle is the property from which the applicant is submitting. This is that. The aim is to open up possibilities for commercial use on that property, and then also all of the properties in the C2 zone. Okay, we will get into the code changes. I don't have the original, but we can read through the strikeouts. So in the C2 zone, this is the area width and location requirements. The applicant is proposing that we delete the sentence that requires the 25-foot setback for all uses, and then the following sentence solidifies that the 25-foot setback is still in place for residential uses. At the end there, they are proposing deleting the lot coverage percent requirement, as that would in effect limit their setbacks anyways. And then they propose an addition of no area width or location requirements for commercial buildings and structures. So that in effect not only removes the front 25-foot setback, it also eliminates the side and rear setbacks that are noted in this paragraph. In the special provisions section of the C2 zone, here are our special provisions. One is that there's a strip of land at least 15 feet landscaped. They are proposing to change the 15 to 5 feet for all uses. This is in our general for all zones, not in the C2 zone anymore. This is number of spaces. This is something that we already practice, I'd say, most of the time. When a use is replaced by a new use, all the parking spaces that were already counted for the last use are grandfathered in. For example, if a retail was replaced by a restaurant, we're only looking for the new parking spaces that are calculated from adding the new use. We're not looking for all parking spaces. If we're confused about that one, I can do a better example
Yes,
after we're
please.
done. And then lastly, this number 7 is adding C2 to and adding the fee in lieu option to C2. Right now, the fee in lieu option is only for C3, and then the designated portions of C4, they're proposing adding C2 to also be eligible for that. Okay. The whole narrative letter is in your packet. This is a abridged version, trying to keep in line with the mission statement of the C2 zone, while also opening up development opportunities for everybody in the C2 zone, especially the property that the applicant is submitting from. And again, just like our last agenda item, these are the questions that we need to consider when thinking about what our recommendation to City Council is going to be. And I believe that is it. Okay, I can go back to any number of these. Oh, did we open the public hearing for this item?
It's not
Doesn't say.
a public hearing.
Oh,
It is also a public hearing. It's under the public hearing
exhibit 3 says public hearing. It
heading.
doesn't say it in the, like at the top.
Because it's 4.2. 4 is public hearing.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Okay.
Pardon.
That seems unclear to me. I hate to be that person. Is this
Noted.
noted?
We can, I'll work with Summer on that. That's something that with City Council, we've been refining within our agenda structure that how items are listed as a public hearing itself and then an action item separately.
Yeah,
Over the past years, we've kind of duplicated and had redundancies. But yes, this is a public hearing that requires a recommendation.
got it. Okay, I will open the public hearing on item 4.2 at 7 p.m. I am just looking through, we still don't have anyone here in chambers and haven't received anything here. I'm just looking through the letter again.
So when I'm picturing this, I'm like almost picturing like a European feel with tables outside and like having it be a little bit more of a friendly tourist zone. Is that kind of what they're trying to attempt here? Is by changing the setbacks, it allows you to have like tables kind of right on the sidewalk. And
I think it also increases the buildable envelope, correct, Corey? I mean, that's ultimately what we're looking at. It would make maybe a property in this zone, which isn't a lot throughout town. There's very specific properties in this zone. I mean, we're sitting in this zone right now here in Chambers, actually. To just increase the buildable envelope, of the property. So if something wanted to be redeveloped, maybe like the property in question, it just gives it more options.
They can build it bigger.
Yeah.
Yes, and maybe a kind of point of frame of where we want to go with the remainder of the discussion is this is an applicant proposed text amendment rather than city initiative. So
Yeah.
with that, Johanna's agenda summary is based off of the application of the applicant, but we do have the applicant here that maybe could, in the kind of second half of the briefing, if the commission so chooses, to hear their testimony that they want to provide on behalf of the item. So it's not really public hearing testimony, but they are technically the applicant of the item to speak to it. So I think it would be appropriate to allow them time to speak to it, some option for questions, but then maybe close that component of it, potentially close the public hearing, and then deliberate.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just making sure I'm kind of looking through everything. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. We still have the public hearing open. Courtney, do you want to maybe take a minute and kind of explain the impetus for this? Obviously, we understand that it's Taylor's property. I assume he's still the owner, over at what is currently Wabi Sabi, just across the street here. I know there have been issues in the past with that property with trying to make things work with the existing code, with the existing structures, all of that kind of stuff. I assume this would sort of lend itself to a significant redevelopment, or at least the potential, if it were sold, it could be, right?
Yes, that's correct. However, the C2 zone is a zone that I've struggled with other clients in the past. And is it possible for me to share my screen? I think a little visual might be helpful for why.
I don't know if it is or not. Kelsey, Johanna, do you guys know? Oh, something's happening.
Yeah, I think it should work. Yeah, given we're operating off Zoom land, that should share just the way Johanna is sharing.
Okay. Okay, are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Almost. Yep, there we go.
Okay, so as we all know, the C3 is our major commercial zone for the city. And diagrammatically, if we're just looking at setbacks, the C3 zone has no setbacks and a max height of 40 feet. If we look at the C2 zone, the vast majority of these C2 parcels, especially on this side of town, are city or county owned. So they lend themselves to being more municipal type properties. And then when we look at these setbacks, they have extreme setbacks that I think are tied to those municipal uses, where you want big public commons around those kinds of commercial, municipal commercial buildings. Then even if you look to the side to R3, it goes back to much less significant setback, which I think further alludes to the fact that the C2 seems to have been set up as a municipal type zone. And then same thing looking on the other side of town, much of this C2 property is related with the hospital, where you would want those large 25-foot setbacks, especially on a corner lot with two 25-foot setbacks. But again, neighboring properties, R4, you see much less significant setbacks. So with this proposal, I really do think it's appropriate. Almost all of the C2, with the exception of this little funky section over here, is directly connected to C3. So when we originally started talking about this code amendment, we were focusing just in this area because Center Street, as we've all walked down, is a very obvious place to continue this commercial growth for our community. But we started with Johanna discussing how do we make something that's applicable to everything. And the general consensus is commercial growth is something that we need. All of these C2 zones connect to C3. How can we provide an opportunity to grow our downtown? And this seems like a way to do it. If you're going to develop something commercially, you get commercial type setbacks. These types of small lots that are here, it's not even going to be possible because they're already townhomes. So we don't have to worry about the long-term implications of what could happen in these types of lots. Same thing up here where there's residential development already. Because it's residential and there's no opportunity for that to become commercial, it's not a threat. So
I mean, that's to be clear, that's the Entrada overnight rentals. That is
correct.
very commercial. I would not characterize that as residential.
Well, as far as the code goes, that would still be residential, correct?
I
Is
mean,
it-
it's
Correct.
C2.
Yeah, the construction type, while the
Yeah, the
operation is short-term
construction
rental,
type.
it has
Yeah.
a quasi element, but it is technically residential. I think Courtney's
Yeah.
painting a fair picture.
Yeah, so there's not a danger that this is going to turn into something different with these proposed code changes. So really, even though I'm representing this particular property and they would have a big benefit to this code change, it's something I genuinely believe in because of our need for more commercial space as a community. That's something that I hear from my neighbors, from my friends, from people wanting to grow their business, that they're struggling to find commercial space. And especially now that we have a lot of housing coming online, I think commercial space is going to continue to become a pinch point for our community and helping it thrive. And I see this as an opportunity to, in a very specific and diligent way, create that opportunity. And one other thing that I want to mention about the proposal is the fee in lieu. We wrote it so that it would only apply if the parcel is on a street with divided parking or center lane parking. So that would only apply to parcels on Center Street at this point in time. It couldn't apply to anything over here since there isn't parking in the middle of the road.
That's good. I think thanks for making that distinction, frankly, and for flagging that, because I think that is I think it's hard, I think in a perfect world, we wouldn't be talking about the stuff over on 400 North on the west side of town, but it does encompass that. And that is a very residential area that does have, I think, continued pressure from the commercial use that is not like a community commercial use, is not how I would characterize it. That is a large overnight rental development where people have lots of trailers, lots of vehicles, lots of noise on busy times, and just not wanting to do, at least for the evening, this is where my head's at, is not wanting to add any sort of like intense commercial pressure to what should be a very low use commercial zone in that area, or the possibility for it in the future. So I really appreciate, I think the parking thing would have been a headache probably because there's already issues with people parking all over and pulling, like in front of the old hospital over there, on that side of town, and particularly like on the corner by like T&H and Snake Oil and the gym and those kind of things too. So I like how that was written, because it directly links to the availability of street parking and the actually established intentional street parking, not just like incidental, we're just going to put vehicles wherever we can cram them kind of street parking. So I appreciate that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because one other thing I want to bring up is that right now, we also have the fact that our parking regulations they will limit the size of commercial development, period, the end. It's very difficult to make parking and commercial work together on a small lot. So I think that is still a very limiting factor that we can count on at this point to make sure that the scale of any kind of commercial that goes in as a result of this code change is appropriate scale for the area that it's in. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions though.
That's great. Thanks so much, Courtney. Corey, Johanna, I have a few just logistics questions. Just obviously we are thinking about a particular property that the applicant has in mind, but this would apply everywhere in the C2 if we were to recommend the code changes and council were to make those changes. So that's what I'm thinking of, looking at everywhere that there's C2, which of course is always the rub, right? Is it okay if I just sort of ask for like an example of maybe what something could be on redevelopment specifically? So thinking about like Entrada again, let's say, so now it's a residential type use in the commercial zone. If that were to be a changed use to like offices, or if they were to decide that this is where the market's going, we're going to raise the condos and try to put something else in that zone, like whether it's just a regular building or a shop or something like that. I guess, how do you see these code changes sort of playing out in that instance? And maybe the same thing so maybe residential type is the first question, if that were to be a use change in type of use. And then the second question would be sort of same question with like the orthodontist that's over there, or maybe like I think that like Riverside Plumbing is in this zone, right, over on that side of town too. So kind of what would be the biggest, baddest kind of development that you could potentially see in this zone with these changes? Like big and bad just being like the highest and best use, I guess, not bad necessarily, like negative. I don't mean that negatively. So 2 questions.
Johanna, if you want to take a stab at that to begin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's wise to look at Entrada. We labeled it as no risk, which I think is accurate for the coming years.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of planning and zoning timelines, it definitely could be redeveloped. Whether we'll have the C2 zone for that long, that we'll see about.
Yeah.
But right now, somebody could take a lot on Entrada and build right up to the lot line. We're going to have the same height, so we're not going to be too big volume-wise, but we're going to be able to be much wider. And they're going to have less landscaping requirement in the front, and they can do a third of the parking as fee and lieu. If we're doing infill, then they'll probably only have to, it's hard to say how many parking spaces they'll have to provide because that'll depend on what the use is and what they're bringing in. But we will have whatever the excess parking that's created from the new use, a third of that could be fee and lieu. Let's see what else.
Would that one be available for fee and lieu since they don't have the center parking over there?
No, it wouldn't.
Correct, yeah.
So maybe the better example, actually, I'm remembering over there, there's actually an empty lot that is right next to the Entrada that is intermittently on and off for sale / covered in elm trees that then get cut down that then come back. That what is like the largest structure with the less setbacks and the sort of larger building envelope with less like landscaping requirements that you could see on that empty lot that of course is right next to like Orchard Villa and that residential area right there. Orchard Villa and like Grand O, I think, is across the street.
well, without
Oh, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Without the lot percentage coverage, it would just be however big the lot is. And then fitting, there's so many variables. Fitting however big the lot is minus how many parking spaces they need, I guess would be your answer. It's hard to give a um, full answer to that.
If I might jump in right there, there's two paths, and then this is I think I'll have my answer slightly separate. So this is in response to, I believe, this question is maybe break this into development envelope type of representation and then use. The biggest bad is I understand what you mean. Not necessarily that it's bad. We need
Yeah,
all of the things. What I might say could be perceived as the most flagrant, given this is a commercial residential zone meant to be
yeah,
buffering. Service station, for example, is currently in
yeah,
that
yes,
use. That's usually been one of the more fearful uses that could be applied in that zone. Now, from a development envelope perspective, maybe not that bad. In fact, it'd probably be less of a development envelope than many other things. However, the use activity, does that make sense in adjacency to some of these residential areas or within itself, which is a mixed use zone? Now, to a development envelope perspective, with money out not being an issue nor groundwater, you could have potentially unsized lot, subgrade parking with a development envelope that you might see in the C3 zone, property line with subgrade parking, even without the fee in lieu or total exception waivers. You could see a mass of construction, 40-foot property line construction, office building, use non-specific. The infill could be what it would be. Um, so that's maybe all the two, I think, trying to address what was that question. But yeah, when I think we're ready, I do have a commentary that I'll answer I think my own way.
Is there, I mean, I know that Courtney said that she's struggled in the C2 zone with clients, but is there a reason why we're asking for the entire C2 zone to change their setbacks instead of just
Just this.
rezoning this one parcel?
they tried that actually,
Mhm.
year or two prior when
Mhm.
uh the property owner came as the applicant that time.
Mhm.
And it was with the intent of making things super duper easy for a renter or for a tenant like Wabi Sabi to occupy the space. We managed to figure out specific workarounds for them to use the space now without having an up zone, but the original proposal was to make the C2 into C3, if I'm remembering correctly,
Mhm.
which felt like spot zoning. And so we didn't do that, I think is the big picture summary, because it was R2 or C2 surrounding, basically. And that would have really, at least how our code is opened, our code is written now, would have really opened up the potential uses, I think, in a way
It's
that,
like it makes sense on Center Street that is a continuation
yeah,
of our tourism growth,
but at
That
least
might be a
how,
great segue whenever we're
yeah.
ready, because that teed me up perfectly, I think.
You're welcome, Corey.
Thank you. No, I think the story of the property and the use on this property is really consistent with probably many of the clients Courtney's talking about. And I don't think it's a secret that even the staff are not uh, great fans of the C2 nor the C1 zones. I think it was a adequate attempt to navigate what would be mixed use land use. I think it was probably um, it was inadequate, and it purely was. There's many holes in that code. There's many development issues. All of those coming to light when land use or property owners are trying to utilize their properties. And in many instances, as Courtney has pointed out, properties that are zoned that, meaning they may have existed in some capacity prior to the zoning and that zoning be applied on top of it, could never redevelop or comply. They just inherently don't meet the standards and can't. So we've created an issue within that zone, which again, it was a valid attempt where I think they were looking big picture and did not take into to account what the on-site issues were. So that brings us again to maybe this particular story of, well, the zone that exists that would give the property owner what it is they need for on-site and what would seem from a very site-specific context to make sense, a continuation, I think, as maybe it was Shaylee saying, a continuation of Center Street, drawing up the commercial district that in a way would work. But looking at the C3 zone as a central commercial zone and how it's identified as a corridor type commercial use, implying that we should have buffering zones as it expands out to the R3 zone or our center town site area, is that we live in a really confined space. In fact, we were speaking about today at our conference that our entire city limits is 4.5 square miles, basically 4 miles long by a mile and a half wide, meaning the ability to buffer using zoning is really limited. You're having one or maybe two parcels of a particular zone to try to attempt buffering through zoning. So that's where we're seeing the pressures of inconsistencies. I think Courtney's observation of it seems that they kind of use C2 and try to apply it in this way of some of the civic spaces or civic type uses and capture those, allowing for commercial / residential / civic. That is all to say, I think what the applicant has identified when we went through is that the planning commission and the application was, we don't feel C3 is appropriate. The next response was, well, if the zone change is not appropriate, can we change the text of the current zone it's in, which is what was essentially the call to action here, trying to make that work. What I'll say with that is the elements identified are really sound, and it's really an appropriate attempt. What I'm skipping through a couple of points here, but just to land on where I'm getting at is this change at the threshold of a major land use overhaul that would then be consecutively followed with a general plan update that is going to be a massive general plan update to re-envision our zoning districts, where C2 and C1, as they're currently described, don't have any place. I think the sophistication or lack thereof right now is calling for a massive amount of sophistication in Moab. So there are many elements in here I agree with. It is that the timing of this comes at when I think the community needs to re-identify what is the entire corridor of Center Street, where I don't believe C2, the way it is currently organized, makes any sense. It's the same discussion we had about our industrial zone, and that we have the same industrial zone in two totally separate areas of our city that have the same development standards that have totally different characteristics and would call to different uses. I hate to be this voice, but the application is very well warranted, and it has a really valid attempt at doing these elements. The conception of it that may fall, we're called to action to do, which is evaluate this on a much larger scale and in a more consistent city. I feel, from my perspective, we're not far enough away from a major overhaul where this viable. We're very eminently going to try to increase viability in a way that conceived. So all these pitfalls that we are talking about of buffering or any other elements will be more defensively placed after these. And that's not obvious response to the applicant, because this is the same piece I told the property owner at the time, which is all of the inadequacy of the code in being able to redevelop your property or adaptively reuse or infill, which is not to say that there is any elements of taking it. The property owner can continue the uses available to him that exist now. We're not taking anything away. But the ability to diversify and move forward, which is what all of our property owners need through almost all of our districts. So this isn't just one particular use. C2 and C1 are particularly flagrant in this way. But we're as the staff really wanting to advance the entire community in this way that this zone attempt is trying to. But in a non-coordinated way, I'm very fearful what the repercussions will be, as well as the communities that are adjacent to these properties may feel this is short of the public engagement that it may warrant.
And that's kind of where I am. This seems, I completely understand. I think a lot of it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
It's the timing, but also the timing being that, particularly this applicant, this property owner, we have already told them once, like, there are other ways for you to accomplish these goals. This is a way that I remember saying at the time, like, there are things about the C2 that could be changed to make things more feasible on your property that maybe is a better route to go than trying to do an upzone. Um, I'm fairly sure that was part of the discussion at one point. And so it seems like that is what they're trying to do now. I think in a way that makes sense. I think there are things about this that give me more of a headache than others. And I don't know if the applicant would be, I mean, we obviously can make recommendations in part or recommendations in whole to city council. I think the supplementary 0.7 about parking with the center, that makes so much sense to me. I don't foresee that being a headache in the future in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, I think it's a kick in the butt that maybe we need a little bit on parking. And I think it's also very consistent with decisions and discussions that we've made in the past. That, just personally looking at this, I have no issue. I think exactly how you said, but I also don't want, this is the public hearing for this tonight. Technically, legally, yes, it would go to city council for final deliberation, and things often happen in this town where folks don't realize it at the planning commission level. It gets to city council, people notice, they come and they weigh in, which I know council would provide a space for. But this also does seem to have a very big potential snowball effect that I don't know that we have thought through yet. And I would really hate to just be like, well, we'll make the recommendation and then city council can deal with it. That is an option. Obviously, we are not the final decision makers on this. And I do think there should be some like really robust notice and discussion that happens for some of these proposals, which probably would need to be at city council at this point. So I also see the utility in making a positive recommendation so that city council can like more closely examine, hear from the public, and deliberate. That's just kind of where my head's at. And I'm curious, what others think. I think it's the particularly here, let me see. Sorry. Oh boy. Johanna, just FYI, the agenda summary is not clickable in the agenda.
Yeah. Yeah, you can.
The ordinance, the letter, and the public hearing ordinance are, but not the agenda summary. I don't know if you can email that.
I was able to click it. That might be a.
I
Oh,
clicked
It is
it
not working
like,
for any of us.
Yeah, it's not
above
working for us.
where the title is actually written, kind of at the page break. If you hover your mouse, there becomes a clickable blank area that opens up the summary.
I'm trying.
Where is it?
Where?
Like right under documents, if you just kind of move your cursor.
Oh, thank you. Yep. Thanks,
It did.
Carolyn.
It's not working.
Okay.
So
I
like
had
on the
to go
previous page, if you
Yeah.
hover right under the word documents.
Start slowly move your mouse upwards until an arrow shows up.
Bailey's on an iPad. We don't claim her.
Oh, that might be why. Might be why.
Kind of along the same lines with Kaya and Corey. When I'm looking at that map, I just was going, oh my gosh, there's so many adjustments that have to be made.
Yeah.
And it made me really nervous to do an entire zone that I think could be potentially an issue, especially when we're literally right in the middle of rewriting code, and that we know that there's going to be an overhaul, because I think it makes sense for this one property. I don't know that it makes sense for every C2. And so that would make me really nervous to do it on like a whole.
And that's kind of where I am. Like we said, like, if we're making a change to the building the buildable envelope for an entire zone. I'm just thinking about it just that way. Literally that title, that's like front page of the TI
A lot.
kind of
It's a lot.
like
It's a big
Mhm.
decision.
like news, I think, and I just want to make sure that we're treating it as such.
Right.
Right.
That it's being
If that makes sense. Not that I necessarily disagree at all with what's being proposed. And I
Right.
am, I certainly,
Mhm.
I don't think like legally we're beholden to anyone, but I do think the property owner in particular and the applicant in this instance have tried many things, and I want to be mindful of that and also try our dangest to do as much as we possibly can right now, understanding that like, yes, the code change is happening, the code rehaul or overhaul is happening, but is happening is still like probably a year from implementation. And so that's also hard when you're trying to either sell or build or plan or whatever. And I don't want to put everyone in the C2 like in limbo in the meantime. If that
Really
makes
quick,
sense.
if again, I'm so sorry to continue to interject, but off
No,
that
that's fine.
point,
Please
I
do.
think when we're talking substantial districting changes or substantial development changes, that that's no light task. Now, if we're tweaking or amending to improve code, that's something that, in fact, our attorneys recommend to us all the time. You need to be more agile to respond to inadequacies in the code. But if we're moving into a redefinition territory, and if I may, I'm going to read from the objectives and characteristics section of the C2. So it's under the subsection 2. Is the C2 commercial residential zone is characterized by attractive and well-maintained commercial and residential buildings set back from public streets and surrounded by landscaped yards. In order to accomplish the objectives and purpose of this title and stabilize, protect essential characteristics of the zone, the regulations are set out as such. So this is to say, again, I'm the first one to probably get my pitchfork out and come against the C2, but it is not my uh, it is not my position to make that determination on behalf of the community. And the community at the time they created the zoning district, that's what they believed. So until, in my belief, we go back to the community and say, we've evolved. Here are the findings of fact that show we need to move. Until the community authorizes that, I would believe there are enough changes in this proposal that actually deviate from the original proposal that this is no longer tweaking of development standards. We're redistricting by a reverse engineered option. To the
Yeah.
credit of the applicant and the product owner, they have highlighted all of the deficiencies that I will also be highlighting. But it is not our
You're not
job to
wrong.
be
It's
judge,
just
jury, and executioner of what the intent is without amending what would be the zoning districts code and the general plan. So all of these things I'm going to be using to advance and advocate for better systems. And we already, I think, from the planning staff have a fairly clear idea of where we want to take that as far as what we would promote from a professional recommendation of a civics core, of a corridor overlay, or even a corridor district of a small area plan, including Center Street, including Third South, including First North. So there are a number of things that we see have to change to, as Courtney pointed out, the housing wheel is beginning to turn. And as everyone knows, the pistons that I have, the economics piston is immediately second. And if we're deficient there, our housing is going to suffer. We have to have these happen in some concurrency. So while the urgency of the applicant and the owner is present, and to your point, Kaya, we've been saying this since I arrived at the city, and
Yeah.
it's been on the backs of many people pushing this agenda that finally we have funded, and we are actively approving and approaching the first land use code revision, which we're now budgeting for and advocating for our general plan to be done in 2027. And I'm going to say that that is the year in which I'm hoping the general plan will be done. Now, for these property owners, that's lifetimes of potential tenants, of potential infill. But my job is not to look at short term. It is to look at the health and growth of our community over long periods of time, minimums of 10 to 20 years. So it's really bitter to speak in a way that is not in a favorable recommendation to advance this at this time, because I am. but it has to be done, in my opinion, in a more coordinated way. So this is really bittersweet, and to continue to put this property owner off in this way. But this is a big enough change. I would be concerned about the repercussions and defensibility of moving away from the objectives and characteristics of the zoning, despite me not being in favor of it.
I agree.
Would it be appropriate to recommend a couple of the changes or a few of the proposed changes with our own modifications to city council? Because I do think, frankly, for me, it's 17.24030 that I have the spidey creepies about a little bit. Everything else, I think 24040A, I understand, but in the spirit of like something but not everything, to not open a can of worms without going through that whole huge process. Like you said, I think maybe 10 feet would be appropriate. That would still increase for the applicant. It would still be in keeping with the character of like a nicely landscaped area on the frontage of the property, for fitting with the intent of the zone, while giving an extra 5 feet that does not have to be landscaped in accordance with the landscaping standards adjacent to a public street, to maybe give more area for parking, to give more area for whatever. Because I do think that's something that, because what's our standard sort of landscaped area for like a C3 building?
There's no landscaped area.
Yeah. So to me, and our standard landscaped area for like R2 would be what?
15 feet.
Okay, so to me, this is a transition zone between the C3 and the R2. And so it makes sense to have a requirement that is halfway between the C3 and the R2. So 10 feet. I'm trying to do this like not arbitrarily here, but to me, 10 feet makes sense because it's still kind of like we said, it's the trend. We're looking at this as the transition. This is these like community nodes we've talked about so often. This is really like what some of the C2 zones are in town. It's nice landscaping, buffering the frontage of the use. You would still have the area width and location requirements, which I know is the major headache here for the applicant, and that totally stinks. But my hope is that this allows a good deal of flexibility while still not kicking the door wide open when we are in that process right now. So saying the supplementary replacement of existing building, that makes sense to me. Additional parking not required when existing buildings are replaced with new buildings. That doesn't seem like that's a massive can of worms that's going to bite anybody in the butt later on. Same with the fee in lieu applying to this zone. I think that makes sense. I think it's fair, frankly, when we do that for property in C3 all the time. That's on the exact same street, like right next door to some of this stuff. And then maybe the 0.24.040A, having that recommendation be that it be changed a strip of land at least 10 feet in width adjacent to public streets. Corey.
Thank you. With respect to that comment, I think you've highlighted a really important thing that I would acknowledge and also think would be appropriate is when we're looking at that, there's numbers of chapters included in this. It's trying to approach what is, we'll just call it a parking issue or parking solutions.
Yeah.
That is an entirely separate category outside of the C2 zone. So this, to say that we are adjusting a particular zone and its characteristics by amending that code, I don't think there's a linkage. You're amending an observed element of those regulations in which you're responding to the realities, tweaking of the code, as I said earlier, which is, as the applicant has pointed out, defensible and specific in a way that I think that very much well could be supported. And I think the staff could support that in that area. As far as setbacks, buffering, those types of elements, I would be apprehensive in moving as we've been discussing with our land use code update, into even if it's a mitigated, 25 feet to 10 versus 0, those are arbitrary elements that is our rewrite we are hoping to remove. If
Mhm.
there is a buffer, it is supported with the findings of fact that would be characteristic of what we're pursuing. So if we have a corridor, so that's to say in the future, I would hope that a 0 lot line, or at least in some ways, if that it's tough in this way, but along frontages of a corridor, say your frontage to Center Street on a particular property could be 0 and would make a lot of sense in that context. But then the setbacks, depending on the uses and everything else, which again
Yeah.
is much more complicated, um, want to be preserved to ensure impacts are being mitigated between uses. That's really a touchy thing. So that is all to say, I don't want to move from one arbitrary bucket into another without the findings of fact of the process to support it. Now, in regulatory adjustment, which in the parking code, that's a separate animal and separate argument, which I would say if we can separate those, I think there's a really real potential for staff and the recommendation to move forward if we were to piece those apart. Now that I think Kai, you laid out, and the applicant has this option, they have the due process right to move their application all the way through unobstructed as they wish. We're purely an advisory body.
Yep.
So if we propose a alternative, that can go either and replace theirs if they elect to do that, or run in tandem. And then there can be a staff recommendation also. So now we're up to, by the time it gets to city council, 3 possible drafts. And then, of course, city council can always apply how they'd like. So it can get complicated and starting to fork quickly. But I think what you're onto could be a way to respond to this applicant, give them some tools in the meantime that are appropriate without potentially undermining what should be a full planning practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you said, this would be in front of council regardless, whether we forward a positive or a negative recommendation, or a positive recommendation with modifications, or a partial recommendation, or whatever that looks like. But I just think, we see these more often. We're the more deliberative body on these things, even if we're just administrative. And it's nice to sort of talk through what the options are, hopefully with the applicant, who obviously could go, all or nothing to city council, or it might be nice to have these sort of alternate proposals. Like, is it still worth it to the applicant if this is all that might be feasible right now to get as far as code changes? My hope is yes. Obviously we don't know what city council would do, but Miles will take our deliberation and explain it to everybody else. He's taking good notes.
I think he's taking.
But yeah, like, I feel like we're the body to maybe make these sort of alternate option proposals, hopefully to help it make more sense for city council, while also realizing, Miles, y'all could obviously do whatever the heck you want to and go a different direction. So I love being administrative only, frankly. So
Overwhelmed.
super glad to not be an elected official. Yeah, I don't know. Carolyn, do you have thoughts? I'm putting you on the spot here, but you're always very thoughtful about these things. So
Yeah, that was a lot of very thoughtful discussion, just kind of taking it all in. I think first, I think all of the proposed amendments are pretty logical and directly correlate to all of the goals that the applicants highlighted in the general plan, and kind of principles of what we're looking to do with the expansion of commercial opportunity in a town that really needs that. So I think everything looks really good, but I also have some hesitations around kind of the scope of the revamp that's being proposed, and whether this is the right kind of pathway for that, with the full code update coming down the pipes. And I echo Corey's sentiment and Kai's sentiment that our intent isn't to keep C2 property owners in this limbo of we're working on the update, just hold on. So to that extent, if there was kind of a middle ground, like some of the options that Kyle was proposing, I think that could be a good path forward for us, but I also agree with all of the concerns that others already voiced about wanting it, if we did move forward with all of the proposed amendments, wanting there to be kind of more robust public engagement around that, because it does change the nature of the zone as it's currently defined. And maybe we don't agree with the way that it's currently defined, but that's kind of what's guiding this decision making currently until the land use update comes through. So yeah, all that to say that I so far am feeling the most compelled by the kind of middle ground recommendation that Kaya proposed of not forwarding a positive recommendation for all of this, but for select elements that would still increase opportunity in the short term for the applicants and others in the C2 zone. We really hope and believe that the land use code update will come through in 2027, but you never really know what things might happen that could derail that. So we don't want to keep everybody in perpetual limbo, and know that these folks have been creative and persistent in trying different routes to increase business opportunity on their property. And Courtney gave lots of examples of others being in a similar plight. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Carolyn. Jill?
I agree
Yeah.
with Carolyn. I'm been kind of on the fence when I first read this, and my thoughts were, we can't just change everything all at once. That's a lot to ask. Like what's that impact on our community? I am definitely more on the middle ground as well. Like, I don't want to see a building come right up to the sidewalk without some type of landscaping. I don't want to be a city in our little town. I don't want big cement buildings. The fee in lieu parking, that makes total sense. If it's a bigger building, you're going to need more parking, and it's not going to happen in a certain location because you can only build so much and have so much parking. So that to me is not going to be something that is negative to me. But yeah, I don't agree with the whole positive motion. I am kind of more in that middle ground as well. But I, like Carolyn said, I don't want somebody to just be in limbo for the next 6-8 months, or a year. We are working on new codes. We are trying to revamp that and get it more up to date for the community because it is so very old. So that's where I stand. So
I'm echoing everything you guys said. I mean, I'm totally on board if we were to make updates to the parking things in general. I think the rest of it, I really struggle when I know we're revamping the whole thing, because I really would like a robust study of these different locations, and how, I mean, we have lots of commercial that doesn't have landscaping strips already.
Right.
And so, but like, how does that impact what's right next door to these zones? And I just think it needs to be robust. I don't want them to be in limbo. So I would lean more towards wanting to make specific exceptions to a property right now, rather than trying to change an entire zone. I would lean more towards that for me.
yeah, and I can't remember when we discussed that, but
Last
yeah,
year,
yeah,
Yeah.
whenever it was, but yeah, it was Miles knows he
And
was
we
here.
had specific
Pretty-
exceptions that were based on the use, the
Mhm,
proposed
yeah.
use.
Which makes
Right
sense to
now.
me.
Yeah.
And it was a robust conversation.
But like, for example, if they wanted to take the existing structure down and rebuild something new entirely, that wouldn't be a like use-based thing. Yeah, that would be what we're talking about right now.
So for me, I don't really want to touch the actual size that the building can be in
Yeah.
the zone until we can
Yeah.
robustly create a new plan.
Seems like a much larger
It
conversation.
feels like that to me too. But I would be okay touching the parking, because I agree with that. That needs to be changed after city.
What do you think about
Parking got
what do you think about landscaping?
to me. I think that's part of the more robust conversation.
Okay.
I think decreasing it to 10 feet still just becomes so many what ifs in other C2, not so much on this property specifically, but it's just, I would rather have that inclusive of the larger conversation.
Mhm. I know I feel so bad because that really doesn't like fix anything with the buildability of it at all. It's parking requirements, which I think, well, it does. I guess if there's not been a fee in lieu option, that is pretty significant.
For me, I think the logic of a strip of landscaping that is halfway between the two zones that the C2 is kind of the transition point for makes sense. And I think our concern is that we want more people to weigh in about it who would be
Yeah.
affected from across the community. So I would feel comfortable, including that modified recommendation to go to 10 feet, knowing that at city council, there will be that opportunity for more of a public forum and input to get reaction to that. And of course, city council will also be discussing and can kind of weigh in with their opinions about whether it makes sense through this opportunity or should wait for the future
Yeah.
more holistic overhaul.
What do you think, Jill? Shaylee, got a feeling for where Shaylee's at, have a feeling for where Carolyn's at. Jill, I think you might be the deciding vote on this.
Jeez.
Well, and let me be clear, like, I don't know that no, I don't know that I'm against this by any means.
Right.
I am actually a huge proponent of people being able to use their land for
Yeah.
whatever they want.
Yeah.
So like I have an internal war here of like,
No,
okay,
for
we're
sure.
trying to like operate within this code and
Yeah,
clean
yeah.
up our code.
Me too.
And over here going, yeah, it's your land. You should be able to do whatever you want with
Yep.
it. Just be considerate. But
Yeah.
how do we control that people are considerate?
Be our quote. Just be nice,
I know,
guys.
like,
That's all we have to do. Just put
That's
that in
literally the
code.
control we have of like, so.
Yeah. Oh, Courtney's raising her hand. Courtney, go for it.
Am I allowed to say something?
Yes.
Please do.
So if the setbacks aren't changing, the landscape buffer doesn't really matter. So I don't want y'all to feel like you have to waste time on
Okay.
that decision.
That helps give us.
Yeah. And also know that we're open to, if there is some way to adjust the C2 that everybody feels more comfortable with, like keeping the 50% coverage, but reducing setbacks for commercial buildings. If there's a way that you feel that wouldn't create a long-term issue, and I really value Corey's input on this too, if there's a way to do that. I mean, there's nothing cut and hard in stone in what we're putting here. Any kind of movement away from the 25-foot corner setbacks that can help for a property like this would be welcome.
Okay. That's great. And Corey, so say we make that partial positive recommendation where we just focus on the parking and we just say, these are the code changes we're recommending based on what the applicant put together. We are forwarding a negative recommendation on the 24.030 and 24.040A. That is still something. Could the applicant have an amended? Could they come with as it's written now, a negative recommendation on as it's written now on that component from the planning commission? I'm just thinking about like notice requirements, right?
Yeah.
And discussion.
No, you're right. You're right on. And I was contemplating that as we're talking.
Yeah. Would
potentially
they
what
be able to
elements-
sort of like to have that sort of like second negotiation idea in their back pocket come city council, or would they need to go through this process again if it were to originate with the applicant?
Yeah, my limited understanding in that, and we'd want to obviously coordinate with our legal review, is that if we are substantially changing the application, it could warrant that it hadn't had proper review and due process of that public hearing element. Now, if we're that is to say, okay, we have the application and we are going to accept these and not accept these. Well, you haven't substantially changed it. You've just accepted portions of it. Now, if we start moving moving numbers around, that could potentially still be acceptable within ranges. But if there are things that were not contemplated or are significantly different, and that's where it becomes gray, is what becomes substantially different. Um,
My
so
argument is
so
that,
legally, I think we
yeah,
could, and even in the moment, our attorney will be available to say, "Hey, we've negotiated outside the context of what can be adopted tonight," but they
yes,
could go back through, and we cure that noticing element by going back through for a particular element or the whole recommendation over again. So
yeah,
pragmatically, yes, there are opportunities for us to move forward in those ways, just as you've described, either partial or even within adjustments, so long as we think that's defensible and reasonable to say, hey, the public's been notified. We're tweaking again, back to this idea of tweaking. We're tweaking it. We're not substantially altering in a way that the public wasn't going to be aware of it as it's moving
yeah.
forward.
Well, and I think
Um,
importantly, we're not changing 25, this would be a scaling back of what the public
mhm,
had been notified about. That would
mhm,
certainly be my argument as the applicant,
mhm.
would be if you're contemplating something that is less
It's
in, yeah,
right. It went from 25 and they've requested 0. Well, we went 10. Well, you're
yeah,
within that realm. It wasn't you've increased it or you even, can't go below 0. So yeah, that I think that would technically still qualify something that could be
and
heard
I
and
guess that would
heard.
be my hope would be that there might be a like, if not X, then Y
Mhm.
situation, maybe that staff and the applicant work on between now and when city council has this in front of them. Maybe understanding, and like, I know obviously we have no idea what city council thinks about this, but giving that sort of option B where the applicant does still really, I think it's super smart and obviously makes tons of sense to ask for what you really want out the gate. And that is what the applicant has done. That is what would make this pencil out the very best in that zone for uh, development, redevelopment, current property owners. Awesome. That makes sense. But I think if there's room to scale it back slightly where it would still be meaningful enough to go through the process, it would probably be wise to have that like out there, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I think it is. But really quick on this is
Yeah.
that as we go forward, I think we're teeing ourselves up for possibly three different applications. The staff recommended, the
Yeah.
applicant original, and then maybe a quasi or even a friendly amendment that the applicant may accept, but they're still going to push
Yeah.
their application. Again, being quite frank, with this property, that with the impetus, the property owner, I think I really do support what's being proposed. It is the fact that it is universal and throughout the
Yeah.
C2, which I don't believe should be the same districts. So we're going to be applying changes that make sense to this property in that context across in another area where it should be a totally different district, not unlike the same arguments we used during the industrial rezone discussion. Oh, or
And we
text
did, so
amendment
that's
of the
unfair.
industrial rezone
It
discussion.
is unfair.
So that's to be
Absolutely.
said. I think, at least from my perspective, Johanna will be collaborative in this. That staff, it'd be very unlikely we would recommend any changes to the development standards in the
Yeah.
C2 zone as
Yeah.
staff. I support them, but I will not be recommending them personally. And as staff, we'll come up with that with legal. It's not just the two of us, it's the staff. It's a comprehensive overview because of the defensibility points of that. So with that said, the recommendations that you guys might cultivate, I think try to approach something as reasonable and within the boundaries of what's been proposed as best you can. Um, but yeah, I think parking could be the area that I think we absolutely could approach from staff and still recommend that tweak. But yeah, anything within the development envelope right now, because in short, I there's a vision that is being cultivated for this property and that Center Street district and the overall civics district that will give, I believe, or what if the public through the public process determines off the staff recommendations, this property what they need, but it needs to be comprehensive and collated with everything else. Yeah, I'm very, very apprehensive to touch the development standards at this time. Hope that makes
That's,
sense as far as the three
yeah,
applications and how they're.
that's
So
also,
when we're presenting to council, they're going to be upset with that. We've talked about green light, green light, green lights. those usually are fairly effective. If we have yellows and reds and mixes of greens, the council's going to be, and Miles may speak to that or not, how effective that approach might be. So that's, I think, kind of leaving that plate. I've spoken a lot on this tonight. I really appreciate the time and willing to hear me through some of these thoughts.
Yeah.
Especially, it's just such a warranted and worthwhile discussion, and it's so bitter to be at this timing piece of this for me. So yeah, as far that's technically how we move forward and very likely how we would handle that as staff.
And we know it's unfair.
Yeah, I know. It gives me heartburn because I totally understand. But to be frank, I think if we were to make a positive recommendation on everything tonight, I think it would still face the exact same scrutiny when it got to city council. And I think hopefully the deliberation that we've had is helpful, understanding that like there might be, if there are, and it's obvious the applicant has already worked really hard on this, which is also what frustrates me about the whole thing.
I think Miles wants to talk.
Yeah. Miles, I will say, be careful.
Yep.
You're welcome to weigh in, but don't say anything that could be like
Nope.
predetermined deliberative for council.
Certainly. I just wanted to speak to what Corey said in the sense that like I have lengthy notes about the discussion you guys just had. And I think council would appreciate understanding your perspective and having kind of like a clear note on your perspective. If you gave a recommendation that was specific to you, we could compare that with staff and then have our own deliberation. Because of course, yeah, I've got notes on all this, but if you four are in agreement on something that could be of interest to council. How's that?
That's fine. Thank you. I love that. The royal we.
I didn't see a staff recommendation in the packet. Did I miss that, or was it wasn't in there on purpose?
Yeah, that's correct. Because of what Corey's been talking about, how much we support this, but also procedurally wish things were different. It's just a neutral.
But
for
you
the
are
rest
going to
of you
be
guys.
putting a specific recommendation in front of council as well. That probably won't be neutral.
I think depending on how
Yeah.
the recommendation advances, we will probably make comment on whether the planning commission or the applicant recommendation is as it approaches. So that is to say,
It all depends.
planning commission recommended this, we agree or disagree with that recommendation versus commentary on the applicants. Is that balanced? I think, Johanna, how you frame that?
Yeah. Indeed. And also, we still need to close this public hearing at some point, just as a note, I believe. Okay.
Yeah. Wait, I did close it.
No.
Oh.
Did I not?
Not yet.
We have not closed this one.
We have not closed this one. Okay. Apologies. We have not closed it. I will go ahead and close the public hearing now at 8:05 p.m. We can continue to discuss. Courtney, thank you for your time. I know this is a long, very drawn out process. You have been here before, and we appreciate your professionalism and expertise always. So thank you. Yeah, I think it makes sense to me to make a positive recommendation on the chapter 17.09220S change and 17.09230B change, but not 24030 and 24040A is probably where I am.
I agree.
Thinking that maybe there might be something still that the applicant staff can come together about that would provide what's needed right now.
Want to take a crack at that?
I can do this motion. I try not to do motions as the chair, but I can do this motion. Assuming that roughly sounds good to everyone else.
I think we're all kind of on the same page with this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Miles said that he took good notes, but as if you feel well prepared, Miles, to kind of represent the conversations that we had where I think we're all in favor of the um of minimizing the required setbacks to make it easier to maximize the utility of commercial lots, but just wanting it to go through more robust, like public scrutiny before making a change of that scale, then I would feel good about the negative recommendation on those two and the positive on the other two.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me, Carolyn, and I do think that represents it well. I understanding that it's a long drawn out process. I am not saying that we need like a full stop on all zone wide cone changes until our whole code is overhauled. I think that probably rings true for everyone. I think we can make small tweaks along the way. I think Corey was saying that we're actually encouraged to do that as well. It's just what's going to be a more robust lasting change. We don't want to change in place that's just going to be there and then it's going to be like substantially different 6 months from now when the whole code gets overhauled, but not just saying like, well, just hang on, it's coming forever. Is I think probably where we're at. Not that like we don't want to touch this or we don't want council to touch this until the whole code is changed. If there are things that can really help existing property owners in the C2 deal with this, because I do think it's hard that it's an all or nothing. You literally go from like nothing to a pretty large setback and a pretty large minimum area requirement. That to me is not a transition. That's like a hard cutoff. That's a hard line. And the C2 is supposed to be that transition zone. So I do think that is ripe for change and keeping with the, like Corey said, the original spirit of why this was put in place in the first place. Okay, I'm gonna give this a shot. I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the Moab City Council for City Ordinance 2026-08, an ordinance of the City Council of Moab amending Moab Municipal Code, Title 17, Chapter 17.09, Supplementary Requirements and Procedures applicable within zones, Section 17.09220, Off-Street Parking and Loading, not loafing, number of spaces to apply parking spot carryover during use changes to all zones, and Section 17.09230, Off-Street Parking and Loading, location and control facilities to allow parking fee in lieu in the C2 zone. We'll say as proposed with that center parking requirement. I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission forward a negative recommendation on and Title 17, Chapter 17.21, Commercial Residential Zone, Section 17.21030, area, width, and location requirements to increase the building envelope of commercial buildings, and Section 17.2140, special provisions to decrease the street landscaping strip.
I second it.
Okay, and Shaylee seconds the motion. Is there any discussion about that in favor? Would that cover it, Corey? So it's a positive recommendation on those two components and negative on the other.
Yes.
With I think reasoning as discussed. Okay. If there's not any further discussion, we can entertain or not entertain a motion. Geez, we have that. I did that. Vote. All in favor of the motion on the table, positive recommendation on 2 of the code changes, negative recommendation on 2 others. Please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, motion passes 4-0. Courtney, thank you so much. I am so sorry that this was not entirely just easy and great. And I really appreciate everything you're trying to do and always do. And I hope some more helpful things happen between now and when this process is over for you at the city council. So Miles, thank you for frankly advocating for the people in the C2 for something. So
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time and deliberation.
yeah, thank you, Courtney. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ah, kills me. Break. Well, we're almost done. I'm going to say we're almost done. We have two small things left. Number 5, action item, election of planning commission chair and vice chair, because we forgot to do it in January, you guys.
Whoopsie.
Yeah.
No.
So currently, I am the chair. Jill is the vice chair. We do have a full slate of 5 commissioners right now. How this works typically, I don't know if Johanna or Corey, you want to maybe lead on this item. Is it's just someone moves for somebody to be chair, and then someone moves for someone to be vice chair, and we vote. So
Got it. And we can
Actually-
break those into 2 motions, of course, two actions, if you will, which I think would be appropriate.
cool.
Well, I'll make a motion to move that Kaya Ehrenfeld should be the chair of our Planning and Zoning Commission because she does such a great job.
Thank you.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Jill and a second from Shaylee. I will forever be in this spinning whirlpool.
Yeah.
Spinning whirlpool. It's fine.
You're gonna have to self-sabotage a little if you
I
want to
tell
get
you, I will
voted
tell
out,
you guys
so.
when I'm gonna quit.
Just give us a heads up. Yep. So then do we vote? I forgot. It's been a
So
while.
there is a motion, there is a second. So yes, all those in favor, this feels so weird. All those in of me, Kai Greenfeld, remaining as chair, say aye.
Aye.
And I will recuse myself from that vote. So motion passes 3 with 1 recusal. Cool. Congratulations, me.
Congratulations, Kaya.
Okay, vice chair. What do you all think? I definitely have. I think Jill has done a fabulous job. Jill has
Thank you.
stepped up to run the meetings a couple times.
I don't have to do it very often, so
But,
because you're
yeah.
so good at your job.
I know there might be some life changes coming for some planning commission members who might also do a great job at this.
Yeah.
So I think with that in mind, and with the freshness of Shaylee and Steve, I would maybe move that Jill remain as vice chair of planning commission for now.
I'll second that.
Shaylee beat you to it,
Yeah.
Carolyn. Sorry.
Ah, dang it.
Okay, a motion for Jill to be vice chair and a second from Shaylee. All in favor of that, say aye.
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 Hey,
Aye.
I don't want to really vote for myself either.
Okay.
It's kind of weird.
All right. So motion passes 3 with 1 recusal from Jill, Carolyn, Shaylee, and myself in favor.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're official.
Yay.
4 months late.
All right.
It's all good.
Thanks, Johanna, for catching that one.
Woo-hoo.
Okay, we have a discussion, but I will also flag that it is 8:15 and I don't want to punt more, but maybe we keep it brief. This is a discussion item.
Mhm.
Back to our land use code update discussion, item 6.1.
No bathroom break.
I'm sorry.
Gosh, you guys haven't had enough already with all of our land use discussions already tonight.
Right?
I'm pretty
Go at any time.
exhausted.
Johanna's been
Yeah.
so patient though,
I
because we
know.
stood her up
We can't
last
take this
time.
away.
I would skip it, but I'm so pumped. Um,
I love how excited she gets on these.
And you've been at a conference all day too. You're a glutton for
Woo-woo.
punishment.
Ooh,
Can't get enough.
so, I'm gonna just introduce some things and then we can start our discussion back in earnest at our next meeting. So I think I said this in our email. But we have to pick up around the bottom half of commercial to keep doing our sorting of all the lists of uses into bigger buckets. And then we still have to work through industrial, public, and accessory, which I think we can move smoothly. But you may have also noticed that I've added very draft definitions, populating in for all the things that we've done. And then I got a little carried away, and I've also gone and done some that we haven't sorted yet. So, and I've added some labels for a deeper understanding. So only the big bucket, I've made an even huger bucket, believe it or not. So our huge buckets would be residential. Our medium huge bucket would be household living or group living. And then our big buckets would be mobile home, recreational vehicle park, assisted living center. And it's a little hard to show y'all. But if the bigger and huge buckets aren't, I don't know, if you need more of a visual, has it changed to the Grand County now or no?
Yes, it has.
Okay, great. So this would be our huge, medium huge, big buckets. Grand County happens to do this because it's a best practice. This is what we see in a lot of communities now. So I'm not only taking it from Grand County, and now that I'm looking, it's pretty suspiciously similar. But I swear, I'm going from a lot of different sources. And so in my definitions, before our next meeting, I would love comments, questions. I have an example of what would be a good conversation starter. Right now, the definition for two household dwellings says a building with two dwelling units located in a single lot designed or arranged to be occupied by two households living independently. And then, as a curious mind, I might say, what is independently? Do we need to put that in? Do we need to expand upon that within this definition? Or do we think we get it? So kind of with every single definition, we need to go through with that fine tooth comb. This one's definitely going to take a little bit more meetings, more conversation than our sorting uses into buckets. But I think it'll be worthwhile because their definitions are the base of all the use work that we're going to be doing. And then I have also added the column anticipated use parameters. And that's kind of just a brain dump category where if I'm concerned that I'm not getting a strong enough definition of live work dwelling, and my mind is telling me to put in live work dwelling that it is set back 10 feet. Then I can go to this column and I can write what's coming up in my mind as we're discussing, just notes, so that when we get to that portion of actually fine-tuning use parameters, we have already looked so in depth at all of these uses that maybe we have a list to jump off of. Yes, Corey.
Thank you. That is an exceptional way to tee us off. I think for one, the prompt of independently is a great way to think about this. is that when there's maybe a phrasing or language, because that's really what we're building this out of, that those are the bricks in which we're building this. When in default, through the state of Utah and its code and LUMA, is it needs to be the plain language or a common understanding of that word. Now, there will be words that you're like, yeah, we all know what word X might mean. It's commonly understood. It's not debatable, nor is it a contextual pivot point. But there's some words that independently, well, one could argue, well, it's not independent. Therefore, it changes the entire definition and unravels it. So we'll have to think about, well, no, I think we're safe with that. There's no footholds for interpretation. A current example we're looking at this is for vendor code, is that it is 2 food trucks in a designated area. Well, designated area is not defined. So could you piece that apart and really? So we'll have to be careful with that. So what a beautiful prompt. Thank you. The second is with these use parameters. That could be an idea of also how we're going to break this into different zoning districts. A particular use might be totally acceptable in 2 different zones, but one zone might acquire different or additional use parameters because of its sensitivities in that area that it may not need in another. So that becomes a distinguishing point where maybe it's not a totally separate use, but it is a use that in this area could have additional use parameters. So this way of breaking it down is not only sophisticated in the way we need, but it creates the opportunities for folks while ensuring we're not allowing things we don't want and not allowing things we do want, which has been our current downfall in the code. So thank you, Johanna. Really well done prompts.
Okay, so I will email out a reminder and then we can start fresh next meeting. Looking forward to it.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Johanna. I know I hate that always gets
Lot of
pushed to
work.
the end and then we have very little energy for it, but we'll get there. And things are proceeding in the meantime. So thank you for
No, it looks, you're
continuing.
doing a great job. Great job. I was just going to make a comment. Sometimes, like when I'm at work in the education world, I forget that I'm talking in education language and then nobody knows what I'm saying. And so one thing that we always remind each other is that if you want to write things to parents as if at an 8th grade reading level. So that's something that I always remember is if an 8th grader cannot understand what I'm reading or like these definitions, that's just what came to my mind. Then, you have to be clear and to get that point across. So when you're reading it going, would an 8th grader, a middle school kid, be able to understand this language? Because a lot of our public does not have an education or able to read beyond 8th grade reading level. And that's true not just here, but in a lot of locations. So that's just, I don't know, a little idea.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. All right. Future agenda items other than the code update.
Yes, code update. I sent you all a email about the bylaws. We have some new state requirements, so we'll be updating our bylaws. But this opens it up to anything that what we currently do doesn't align with what's written. This would be the time to update. If anybody has any innovations, let me know. I'll run them by our attorney and we can see about updating the bylaws. I'll be sending out a redlined copy of the bylaws with the state requirements. And that's kind of a big one. We got some more requirements for you all training wise. So, but it'll be fun. Learning, we're all lifelong learners. It'll be
We're
good.
all notoriously not overextended people either. So that
true.
should be really easy. None of us are busy.
Yep. Nope, nope,
How do
nope.
we say yes to things?
Johanna, you said, I think, didn't you say in your email that you needed feedback for the bylaws by the 16th? So that's before the next meeting.
Yeah, if we're gonna vote on anything, then we'd want to run anything by our attorney. But if we want to just use the next meeting as a discussion and not plan to pass anything, then I can extend that deadline for sure.
I think it might make sense for folks to maybe email Johanna any suggestions or flags you have just individually, but we shouldn't be like having any discussion about it outside of the meeting.
Great.
So maybe it would make sense, Johanna, to have next week be a discussion to put together something to then vote on at the following meeting.
Wonderful.
Probably makes the most sense if we think that there's going to be a lot. If you don't receive anything, then just propose what you're going to propose and we can vote on it. But
also I have a I have a housing task force update that I'll be giving.
yes. Cool.
Along with that, many updates. So yeah, as Johanna are both at the APA Utah chapter spring conference, our representation is really excellent. Alexi is here as well.
Cool.
We have two speaking sessions, which is quite an accomplishment given the number of presentations. So it's been a really great conference. But tomorrow there's going to be a large legislative update on behalf of APA Utah. Johanna and I, we've already observed the Utah Land Use Institute and their legislative update. So at the close of this session, we should be able to provide, here are the entities that have provided updates and can convey that to you also as here's the general updates in short. We'll do our best to condense those. There were many, but I think it'd be appropriate to also, along with the bylaws, which are specific to your improvements, there's been broad land use updates in the state this past session.
Cool.
More legislative updates.
All right.
I think we've reached the giggling point.
Yeah, we have. I started the giggling point. I don't know what you're talking about. All right. All said,
Real quick before you
Oh, yeah.
adjourn, Kaya, if I may.
Yes.
Kaya kind of alluded before to some life changes for a planning commission member, which is me, and just wanted to share the sad, happy news with everyone that I'm going to be retiring from the planning commission this summer. A couple people know that my partner got a job in Durango, and so I've been splitting time between Moab and Durango, but we're going to be having a baby this summer, so we should probably live together. So I'm going to be relocating to Durango, hopefully not forever, but
Congrats, that's awesome.
That's great.
thanks.
Good and bad.
Cool. I can say things now about it.
Yeah.
It's officially a matter of the public record now, Carolyn. So
It's pretty official.
it's very official.
But
Very
yeah, because of that, I think Johanna mentioned they're gonna start the search pretty soon because we know it can take a while to find a replacement. So feel free to start recruiting people that you think might be a good fit again.
Okay.
I know we just did this, but
It happens.
Just shaking the bushes out for planning commissioners.
All right.
Well, huge
literally beg.
major congrats, Carolyn.
Yep.
We're super excited.
We're excited for you.
Speaking from
Thanks.
recent experience, it's pretty cool. And if you're back to Moab, you can definitely still be on the planning commission and have a small child. I will attest to that.
Yep.
My one evening activity, you guys, away from home. So, all right. Well, great. Yes. Note that we will be searching for a new planning commissioner to replace Carolyn between now and when her kiddo is due. So, all right, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:31 p.m. Thanks, everybody. Really good meeting. Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Safe
you.
travels.
Good luck with
Huge
your
thank you to
presentation,
Kelsey,
Corey
who
and
has
Johanna.
done all of our tech tonight here in
Yeah, thank you,
Chambers.
Chelsea.
Bye.